Good morning, everyone. I am calling to order our regularly scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Elizabeth Glidden. I'm the chair of this committee, and I am joined today by council members Cano, Bender, Yang, Quincy, Goodman, Fry, and Palmisano, and we are a quorum of the committee. I will note that Councilmember Andrew Johnson could not be with us today as he is on city business with another board where he has just been appointed to an officer position. So we wish him well. We have one discussion item today before we get to reports of committees, and this is an update on our Minneapolis Creative Vitality Index. I'm not sure who is starting off the presentation, so come forward if you are. Ms. Kayem.
Council Vice President. Good morning, council members. I'm Gülgün Kayem. I'm the Director of Arts, Culture and Creative Economy, and I work in the Coordinator's Office. And I've been asked to make a presentation on the Creative Vitality Index data, which we recently completed at the end of the year, and we'll be presenting it publicly after this presentation. Before I begin, I also want to acknowledge that Rachel Eng will also be presenting with me. Rachel is an intern working in my office. She's a recent graduate of the Humphrey School, and Rachel has expertise as a data analyst, and she worked very hard on this report, so she will also be presenting. I want to give some background on what we're talking about so that you can understand where this is coming from before I continue. So in about 2012, the work began in earnest to begin to understand the scope and scale of the creative sector in the city of Minneapolis. Out of that work, we created the Minneapolis Creative Index 2013, which you all should have received. You should have had a PowerPoint sent to you, and you should have also received a hard copy of this report. This is the full report that includes the Creative Index data. And I apologize for the confusion in the names, but the Creative Vitality Index data is actually data that we receive from a national data aggregator. And the Minneapolis Creative Index report is a full report that includes qualitative information that we add to that hard data. And today we're really just going to be talking about the hard data, because that's what we've updated. The qualitative information is information that we really gather in the community ourselves, and we are looking at with specific questions in mind. So the report was produced, as I mentioned, this report itself in 2013, and the actual production of that report included a steering committee that had representatives from the Minneapolis Art Commission, the Council, CPED Economic Development Division and Research. We also included a cross-sector of local system partners and arts organizations in our groups. That we also talked to many arts organizations, and at the back of this report, a full listing of those organizations are presented. In 2015, this year, we will be also creating a full report which will have qualitative information. So the Minneapolis Creative Vitality Index data itself is a sophisticated arts and creative economy measure. It is compiled and it is predefined by the Western States Arts Federation, which is an experienced research organization working to benefit state arts agencies in the West and nationally. So WestArf is the acronym that we use to talk about this organization. In terms of what the data itself provides for us, this is the breakout of what we look at in the data. Community participation is defined as per capita revenues of arts-related goods and services, and occupational employment. So a 60-40 split is what that data provides us, and within that 60-40 split, we have a lot of detail. Why do we feel this is important? We feel we need foundational information about the creative sector in order to inform us about how this sector is behaving. It provides us with a framework for conceptualizing and understanding key elements of the creative economy. The data sets themselves are gathered by the Creative Vitality Index are actually closer, we believe, to the true characteristics of the creative sector. The CVI data provides us with information, for example, about for-profit and non-profit information. And we believe that it's important for us to see the full scope of activity in the creative sector and not just focused on one element of it. In fact, many reports that are produced locally tend to present non-profit data exclusively or for-profit data exclusively. Here we're looking at the whole. It also measures creative workers through occupations rather than industries. And by that, I mean in the past, we've looked at industry data. We've looked at the Guthrie and everybody it hires, including the janitor. Here, we're looking at the Guthrie, all the artists it hires, including their contractors. So we're actually able to follow the people. And this is important because we know in the creative sector that a typical creative worker builds their work on multiple income streams. So somebody may be working at the Guthrie and also performing at Brave New Workshop and various other locations. So it's important here that we follow the individuals and how they are working. And we believe, as I mentioned, this is a better way to look at the sector in general. It helps us to educate and augment the efforts of arts leadership and advocates in building strategies and policies that strengthen the creative sector. So this information, for example, can be looked at from a geographic standpoint. We can look at this information as the metropolitan area. We can also break ourselves out, the city of Minneapolis, out from that metropolitan area and look at ourselves separately. We can also break down the city of Minneapolis into zip codes, which from a data standpoint is actually rather detailed and very useful. It can also help us track and compare our creative economy regionally, nationally, and we can look at ourselves in comparison to other cities. And that this is, we think, an important element, especially when we're looking at ourselves compared to our peer cities. We think that the creative sector as a key factor or a driver of economic growth is an important piece of information to help drive our quality of life and our competitiveness in general. So, for example, we, in the 2014 update here that's before you, looking at the 100 most populous metropolitan areas, we're showing here the top 10 of that 100. We can see that we are 5th in the country when compared to our peer cities. Last year, we were 6th, so we've gone up, which is a great piece of information. And as a communication tool, that is also very useful. It helps us actually communicate how the city is doing compared to other cities, and I think that's very useful when we're competing with these other cities. As I mentioned, the data is annually gathered, so because we have data that is highly reliable, in other words, this data comes from the federal government, it comes from IRS sources, we're able to know that we can look at the same information over time, and that helps us build a reliable picture over time about how the creative sector is actually behaving. And when we have a reliable understanding and a picture, we can begin to predict its ups and downs. And again, for informing and planning, all kinds of basic baseline information like this is extraordinarily useful. It also helps us be more accurate in our predictions. And finally, in terms of leadership, as the city can become a nonpartisan leader in this work, because the city cares about all aspects of the creative sector, both for-profit and non-profit activity, both organizational activity and the activity of the individual. And in this case, we can become a nonpartisan leader and help inform the community about what's happening. As I mentioned, often reports are developed and delivered by organizations that really want to look at their work. So foundations will report on their work and what they're doing. Nonprofits will report on their work. We are really interested in reporting and talking about the whole. As I already mentioned, communication is a key aspect and a key reason why this is a useful document. The comparative to peer cities can help other organizations compete. It can help draw people in. I know, for example, that the report is being used by schools, art schools, to give to prospective students so they can see what the city does and how you can earn a living in the city. We also look at key trends in retail spending, and again, that can help us make informed decisions, and it can also help us get an overview of how the zip codes themselves are behaving and make some informed decisions about that. I'm going to go in now and transition to Rachel, who will be spending a little bit more time on the retail part of this update. Rachel.
Thank you. We do have a question in queue, and I'm just maybe going to ask Councilmember Gordon, do you want to ask that right now, or should we wait and hear the rest of the report? I don't know what your question is relating to.
We could wait. Maybe it'll get answered. Thank you.
Okay, let's do that then. Let's finish the report and then see what questions or comments council members have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Gulgun, for laying the framework so I can dig a little bit deeper into the data that's included in the 2014 update. So as mentioned, we approached this document as an update on some of the data that we presented in the 2013 report. That said, after analyzing the numbers, we focused on the data that could help us tell a compelling story of how the creative sector influences the Minneapolis economy. The most compelling story we found to tell shows the impact of community participation reflected in consumption of arts-related goods and services. I want to call your attention to the second page of the 2014 update. This page shows the community participation numbers that factor into the index value. As you can see, the creative sector contributed over $800 million to the Minneapolis economy in 2013, which is a 13% increase from 2011. This $831 million is made up of two types of revenues: nonprofit revenues and retail sales. First, nonprofit revenues, which contributed over $300 million to the Minneapolis economy in 2013. An example would be the dollars that the Minneapolis Institute of Arts brings in from programming, grants, and ticket sales. The other type of revenue is retail sales, which reflects the revenues from for-profit industries that include art dealers and individual artists, performing arts, books, records, music stores, and photography stores. So an example of creative retail sales would be buying a guitar or a book, or a piece of original art from a local artist, or a ticket to see a show at First Avenue. We saw a 37% increase in retail sales from 2009 to 2013. So 2013, it's $520 million from retail sales. As you can see from the graph on the top right portion of this page, much of the increase can be attributed to individual artist sales. To put retail sales of the creative sector in context, we decided to look at sales for sports industries. We found that creative industry sales and sports industry sales in 2013 were nearly equivalent, with creative industry sales 97% that of sports industry sales. Moving on to creative employment data, which is shown on page 3 of the 2014 update. Of all the creative occupations in the metropolitan area, 26% are located in Minneapolis, and about 5% of all occupations in Minneapolis are creative. Both of these figures are consistent with numbers in the 2013 report. We also looked at creative occupations with the most jobs in Minneapolis, and that list is shown on the top right. Those are similar, the top occupations are similar to those in the 2013 report, with photographers, musicians and singers, and writers and authors on top. We also focused on the bottom right of this page on occupations that are growing. The creative occupations that are growing the fastest, highest rate of growth in Minneapolis include actors, fashion designers, and sound engineering technicians. So with those highlights from the 2014 update, I will let Gulgun wrap up this presentation with an explanation of how the 2013 report has been used both within the enterprise and in the community.
All right, and before you leave, I think we have a question maybe specific to you. Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a curiosity on these 2009 numbers, when you go back to your first slide there, not the first slide, this one, yeah. The 2009 numbers, how do we retrospectively go back and get that number since we've only started analyzing this in the last several years?
Sure. So the data that we received last time we did the report had information from 2009. So in the report that was published last year, the data includes numbers from 2009 to 2013. So,
and are those our numbers or are those national numbers?
Correct. Those are numbers that are provided to us by Westaff, the same company that provided the data this year.
I think if I understand correctly, since these numbers are actually, they exist nationally, so the data aggregator goes to national sources and can collect this data for us. So these numbers exist. We ask them to go get them and produce and aggregate them. So essentially, they're there. We have to have someone go get them. And because they're centralized, collected centrally, it makes it much easier to do that, administratively measured.
I guess, but my question goes to, in 2009, we did not have this initiative.
That's true, right. We asked them to look back. When we first did the report, we asked them to look back. We felt it was useful to spend some time looking back at specific data, and they actually did that for us as a special case.
But it's their numbers. Did we give them the numbers, or?
The CVI is pre-formulated, and they look at the spread of occupations to revenues. And we said to them, we are interested in jobs. We'd like you to look back at jobs for the last 10 years for us so we can see how jobs are tracking. Mm-hmm. And in this particular report, we really wanted to show how what changes have happened and how dense our particular occupations are. And they did that specially for us the first year so that we could get a sense of what the last 10 years look like. And again, since these are administrative measures, these aren't difficult things to do. It takes a lot of time and energy to do it and dig into all that detail, but they did that for us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So I would just want to spend a little bit of time just talking about how the report is being used. And I want to add here that we did not do any research, we did not create an evaluation to find out how this report is being used. If this is important, we could do that in the future, but this is anecdotal. So this information is what I know based on presentations I've made, encounters I've had in the community, and people just volunteering this information to me. I can talk very clearly, obviously, about how I have used this report. So under reporting, I've categorized the report into different sections, and under reporting, the data itself is being used for reporting in the community as well as in the city. I use the data for the 2013 Results Minneapolis presentation on the arts, culture, and creative economy sector. We are sharing the data with other organizations. Hennepin Theatre Trust, for example, is using the report, especially the geographic-specific data in the Hennepin Arts District work that they are doing. We are also working with Minnesota Citizens for the Arts, Minnesota State's Arts Board, Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, and a collaboration of local arts funders and nonprofits organizations to use the data in Minnesota Compass annual reporting. We're currently developing a methodology whereby we'll be able to provide this information to Minnesota Compass and have this as a regular information that goes into its annual employment reporting. Under programming, we use the CVI data to make some decisions about the Creative City Challenge program, which is hosted at the Minneapolis Convention Center, collaborating with my program. We looked at shrinking occupations numbers in arts and in architecture and design specifically, and we focused this project on architecture and design in order to amplify the region's wealth in architects and designers and use it to highlight what this community is up to. Under planning, the CVI data was used during the city's goal setting and strategic direction process. The city goal, businesses big and small, move, stay, and grow here. We support entrepreneurship while building on sector strengths such as arts, was used to influence that goal. Once we knew data about the sector. The Creative City Roadmap is a planning process that is coming out of my office, and that economic data will be used to inform decisions for the economic work groups who are working around creative economy, for the artist support work groups who are looking at occupations and individual artists. The data was used to inform the Nicolette Mall redesign. I saw the data quoted in the 3 finalist proposals, and especially around the idea, because downtown Minneapolis has the most creative workers, in the idea that the design of the environment should reflect the people there. Here we knew that there were many creative workers, so that design became more creative. The whole report itself has been shared in the community by a wide variety of organizations. 2 local art schools, as I have mentioned, have reprinted the report as a recruiting tool for prospective students. The start of the Greater MSP have shared the report with their members. Pillsbury House and Theatre has used the report in formulating its own evaluation methodology. The McKnight Foundation issued the report to its board. Asian Media Access issued the report to its board. I have made approximately 20 presentations in the last year to local business associations, neighborhood associations, arts organizations, and at national conferences. So that's a brief summary of what I know on the report. I'm more than happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge first that we have been joined by several other council members, Council President Johnson, of course, as well as Councilmember Gordon, Reich, and Warsami, and we do have some questions. I just want to know, Councilmember Gordon had been waiting patiently, so I'm going to call on him first, and then Council President Johnson.
Thank you. And I have a couple questions. One thing I want to understand better is just the first slide that you showed us. Yes. With the 60-40 split. And is that a, are we dividing up the $831 million and we're seeing where it's going in this slide, or what is the 100%?
So it's 60% of the data is community participation, and the way the CVI aggregators look at community participation is from the point of view of revenues. So ticket sales, they're saying that community participation is people buying goods and services in the creative sector. And then 40% of the data looks at employment. So that's how the weighting of the full, when we get a full number such as we are 5th, it looks at all of that and aggregates that down into a particular number, a single number.
And just to be clear then, for the 60% for the community participation, that's looking at dollars, and it's the 40% also looking at dollars?
It's looking at occupational employment. Rachel, could you want to clarify that? I need my analyst.
Do they mean hours?
It's looking at numbers of employment, numbers, so it's looking at numbers of workers. Yeah. Correct? Yeah, per capita. So we're looking at the numbers of workers in our geography in the city of Minneapolis.
So I'm confused.
So it's dollars and people. How many workers and how much is consumer demand? And
that's how they've just kind of arbitrarily decided to weight the index. 40% is getting weighted for the number of people who work in the industry, and 60%
right. So an index number is a boiling down, I guess is the best word to use, is a boiling down of a number of a lot of information. And Weststaff's Creative Vitality Index is actually an evaluation measure that has been predetermined. So it's not arbitrary. This is the index for any city that would want the index.
Oh, I know. They use the same arbitrary weighting for all cities. It's not
so this is the formulation. You have to, in essence, agree with the formulation in order to then participate in the formulation. And then they look at that spread for your region. They look at participation and revenues for your region. And they say, okay, this region versus this region, this is how they compare.
Yeah, I understand. And I didn't mean to imply by arbitrary
that
they switched it around for different cities or anything like that.
One of the things that I'm interested in the Creative Vitality Index is the fact that other cities are participating and that other cities find this useful too, that there has been a long development of this work. In the creative sector in general, there have been many questions around how to evaluate the creative sector. And this is one way. There are definitely other ways, but this is one way of evaluating.
And it's a very interesting tool, and we can compare ourselves to other cities, and I appreciate that. I'm also very interested in the kind of employment and the occupations.
Yes.
And I'm particularly, I guess I'm interested in how many people actually make a living off of their art. I'm also curious about how many people aren't collected in here, because there's certainly sectors of artists out there who are kind of operating underneath the traditional economy, and people who are, I know many people in the theater and in music who basically have another job that actually is paying for them, but then they're doing this, trying to, so there's, and just as we're celebrating, it would be interesting if we could also celebrate how many people are actually making a living wage job off of the art and how many aren't, and maybe compare some of the different occupations and how we're doing. I noticed, I think second was musician and singer in occupation, and so, well, how do you actually get counted as a musician and singer and all of those things?
So again, this information is provided to us through national data sources, and we're looking at things such as I-90, excuse me, and we're looking at if people are reporting in their taxes, then we're able to gather that information and report on it. But if people are not reporting the information, then we are unable to get that information. For us to find information about people who are not reporting that information will require for us to do tailored research for our region, which can be done. And in 2015, we will be talking about what is that research part that we need to do for 2015. What's the story? What's the qualitative discussion that we need to have? And that could be one element of it. I know council members will be involved, so that could be one element of what we look at. It is a difficult question because we rely on, one of the benefits of getting this information is we can get it reliably and annually, but if you have to annually spend a lot of energy gathering that data, then it's more difficult to get it reliably and annually. So you give up one for the other, and I completely understand what you're saying. There is a lot that's happening under the radar, and what we can show is what's on the radar.
And I guess I'm not sure if I think we have to pour our resources into that. It's clear that our national organization isn't digging in and trying to survey and collect that information and standing there. But I also am wondering if they are reporting out any average wages for the people that are reporting, for the people who, so do we have any information about that, especially for those sectors? How much are our photographers making? How much are our musicians making? How do we compare to other regions in that capacity?
So what I hear you saying are there industry standards around what's an acceptable wage for a photographer, what's for a musician, etc.?
No, I want to know what you can make. Are the San Francisco musicians making a lot more than the Minneapolis musicians? What's the average wage of what's out there? So that's kind of what I was wondering, if they collect that data and they have that, and that's available to us too.
Again, the CVI West Staff data doesn't provide that, but that's certainly an interesting research question that we can look into. I know that there is another data gathering method that has arrived locally, so I can investigate that and find out information. I'm just saying that all of this requires research, so that's an interesting research question that is worthwhile. But the part of that you mentioned about people working under the radar, that is something that unless people are reporting, I'm unable to find out unless I go away and do very specific, very tailored research around that area. So it's an interesting research.
Yeah, well, it's an important maybe point just to be aware of, that there could be a lot more going on. This is the tip of the iceberg, and there's more.
As we develop this over time, yes, there'll be more questions, exactly.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Gulgun, you said in your presentation that originally you did the data was, like your example of the Guthrie actors, janitors. Where would those janitors are still counted?
Yes.
Are they not in? So they're in the occupational employment then?
Actually, no. We remove people who are not creative employment. So if it was the person who was working as a janitor at the Guthrie, we did not include them because we're interested in looking at people who are employed in creative activities.
Oh,
So we
So this underestimates, actually, then, very highly underestimates the economic impact and the employment that is associated with the creative economy.
through organizations. So you're saying that there's value in looking also at who the Guthrie is employing outside of the creative occupations.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Then the answer to that is yes. Then yes, we're not looking at all the people that the Guthrie is hiring. We're looking at the creative workers that the Guthrie is hiring, and we're following those creative workers who are working both at the Guthrie and at Brave New Workshop or various other places. We're actually following the individual and counting who they are and what they're doing, yes.
Interesting. Okay, another question I have. I just want to make a comment. I find it sort of hard to follow all of the projects we have going that have the title of creative in them. And I found it confusing during the budget process. I just want to say that. Something came across my desk last week from Long Range Planning, Creative City Making. It's a grant program apparently with artists embedded in our city, and it has a number of project titles in the body of the work, including project title Creative Asset Mapping. So I'm just saying this is really confusing, and now you say the convention center has this Creative City Challenge. We got to think of some other names because it is very confusing. And
yes.
So what does this report cost versus the Creative City Making project? That kind of information gets muddied and muddled if we don't have some different names and understandings of what
we
we're
are
dealing
actually
with.
working around the idea of some sort of brand. So we've had this debate internally about should we keep using these names. The Creative Vitality Index was a name that came to us, so we didn't choose that. It was predetermined. And in naming the report, Mayor Ryback really wanted to call it the Creative Index, not the Creative Vitality Index, which is what we originally had thought we were going to call the report. So just to say that there are names from the outside as well as names from the inside that we've been working with. And one debate we have had is it a brand we're developing or is it more confusing? So we are actually trying to, so I'm hearing from you that it is confusing, that it isn't helpful.
Yep.
It's good to know. Thank you for that feedback.
And I just really want to, I want to go back to my original point here that artists are important. When you're talking about the economy, I completely understand that, and we have a great group of artists in many different occupations in the city. But if we would measure what impact the arts have with associated employment, I mean, to me, that's an even more spectacular number. So I'm just always surprised at how many people I have, in my ward that work, at Target Center, stagehands, that those kind of people, and if we don't count them, we're kind of missing out on the total picture.
I believe we are looking at people like stagehands. We're looking at people who are, so our definition of creative employment isn't just the actor, it's the florist, because that requires creativity. We're looking at, so just to note that our spread of creative employment is quite wide.
Okay, well, that would be helpful information as to who you're counting then.
In the index, in the original index, we have identified all of the employment that is defined as creative employment. We have some options in this following year to look at that group and cluster and add. So certainly, I will bear in mind what you have. Again, we're looking at employment that requires creativity. And one would argue that, again, florists do also require creativity as much as actors require creativity. How you define that is where, of course, the decision-making comes in. But I'm hearing from you not just the creative employment, but associated non-creative employment. So that's something that we could explore.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. I'm not seeing other council members in queue. I had a couple of questions or comments myself. I actually wanted to follow up on Council President Johnson's comment about what's the impact of this sector.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the stagehand or the florist may be counted in here, but not necessarily the person who is the ticket taker or the accountant for the organization. So we're not really getting that breadth of what's the impact of this industry segment as a whole. So I thought actually that was very interesting. The other question or maybe comment I'm going to make, and maybe this is as much to, I know Spencer Cronk, our city coordinator, was here and has stepped out, but is maybe as much to our council members who are on the executive committee for Meet Minneapolis. I didn't hear you talk about Meet Minneapolis and how they may use this. I'm assuming that they do use it in some aspect, but I think this is a very significant attractor to our region. Just on a personal note, it was one of the attractors for me to come and move back to Minneapolis as an adult, is thinking about the art scene and what I could both participate in and just enjoy as a resident. And I'd be very interested to know how Meet Minneapolis is thinking about its connection to this important segment of our economy, and how its work plan for the coming year may also incorporate this as somewhere on the priority list of how we're thinking about the work that we do through Meet Minneapolis. So I don't know, maybe that's just a comment to hang out there. I don't know if anybody else has more information than I do, so.
I've simply reported on what I know, what I've heard directly about use, so I don't know if Meet Minneapolis has used it. No one's mentioned it to me, so I haven't put it down. I didn't want to assume they had if they hadn't. But I do agree with you that one of the competitive advantage of our city is that we have an enormously productive creative sector. Looking at the percentage of employment, which is about a quarter of the regional employment, and our output, which is about half of the overall revenues, is actually quite a significant piece of information. We have a highly productive creative sector, and a creative sector that is comparative to other similar types of sectors. And we chose sports because it sells tickets and it sells things. And when in comparing sports, we actually just separated out the for-profit activities. So we put for-profit numbers against for-profit sports. So we had apples-to-apples comparisons. We didn't even add the non-profits to that. So I would argue that there's potential here. I think that there's this is information that can help us, create strategies for the city as an attractor and as a competitive advantage. I would agree with that point of view.
Okay, I'm just, there are several more council members just got in queue here. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I just wanted to express my gratitude for the work in compiling this data-driven look at this really important sector of our economy. Looking back on my days, studying regional economic development, there's a pretty significant body of research which backs up what you just stated about the importance of arts, both as a direct employer and direct contributor to our economy, but also all of the sort of spillover and other effects that arts have on our economy. And it's clearly a really important piece of the ward that I represent, with a number of really important arts institutions, but also a lot of sort of grassroots, artists and folks who are gathering in a lot of different ways. So, just wanted to say thanks for this great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I echo one of the comments in regards to that residual employment effect. I mean, I know it can't go to a standard formula. However, it could be very valuable information to make the case about residual economic activity. If someone's a janitor at the Guthrie Theater, by golly, that's a story to be told. This notion of things getting fuzzy and gobbledygooky, I think the value of a real standardized, recognized, professionally managed and crafted set of data is important, all the more important, I would say, because it's very easy to get fuzzy in what's creative and whatnot. And there's even very interesting articles out there that are kind of making fun at how loose municipalities and civic boosters are using their coolness factor and that sort of thing. And very, we don't want to be looked upon in that way. And with the numbers that are coming out of, which is exactly what we expect. I mean, this is in Jay Strobel's shop. They are the numbers people. The results Minneapolis came out of that, so we would expect that it would be this level, and I think it really meets that standard that we expect. And it is highly valuable in terms of making the case. And so I know with the folks in the Arts District in Northeast Minneapolis, and I think Councilmember Frye, we've had these conversations where they're able to take this data and strategize how they can do their job better as a group collectively, which is no small feat when you're talking about a collection of voluntary organization of artists. To have data to rally around and strategize around is immensely valuable. And I don't think they could advance their work without these tools. And they certainly wouldn't be able to create these tools on their own. So I highly value this product.
Thank you very much. And I want to also add that in the realm of data for the sector, this is an evolving field. This is the hot topic in our industry around how to measure the sector. It is, because it's such a difficult sector to measure, how to define creativity, who do you include, who do you exclude, how do you make sure that the information can be reliable and not, you don't have to go out there and gather that information, because when you have to gather, it loses its reliability. So that piece of it, I believe, it's a debate in the industry, but this Creative Index is actually one that has had some staying power. So I just want to acknowledge that for those very reasons.
And if I just may add, the notion that we do have an agreed upon set of criteria, when we're ranked number 6 in the nation, it means something,
Yeah.
I mean, we've all agreed that Philadelphia's agreed and LA's agreed that this is the measure. And when we go to 6 to 5, we get to understand what's behind that 6 to 5 shift, besides the bragging rights. What's the mechanics of that? It's a very real tool in that sense. But it also helps with the bragging.
Yes, in fact, I forgot to mention that the mayor has used this data in a number of speeches, including Bragging Day. So we could use that information. One thing to add behind the 5th versus 6th is that we actually we didn't just do better; other cities did worse than us. So to sort of demonstrate that Minneapolis performance is that so musicians are strong here, actors are strong, that there's actually strength in a number of parts of the creative sector that create more resiliency to, so just to sort of note that one question to ask ourselves is, why are we pretty much staying strong while other cities are dropping in their index? That could be another research question we look at this year, to sort of maybe describe, it's because there's strength in actually all aspects of our sector.
So I'm going to move on to our last question, and then I think we need to wrap up here if we can. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I just wanted to highlight, I know Minneapolis uses the arts and entertainment as part of its sales picture. This is a big deal to the people who visit Minneapolis, and it's a big deal to our local businesses. We talked a lot about some of the ancillary economic impact that the arts community has on the city. It's not only part of our sales picture of what we're trying to present as an outward face at Meet Minneapolis, but it's also generating business at the convention center, it's generating business at the Target Center, and it's generating tax base, especially in sales tax, along with the museums, the festivals, the music, the nightlife, the theaters. These are all people who are visiting downtown Minneapolis and spending their money. So it has a greater economic impact than just employment.
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at the data, we did break down what an average person is spending when they visit Minneapolis, and that went up too. You'll find that on page 3. So just to note that, yes.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for the report and presentation, and thank you to my colleagues for a robust discussion, and I think some good ideas for areas to dig into further as you move this work forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We will now turn to, and actually I apologize, we need to receive and file, I think, is our action on this, so I will just move to receive and file. On approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, and that item is received. And next we turn to our reports of committees, and our first is Community Development and Regulatory Services. With that, Chair, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Our committee anticipates bringing forward 7 items for approval tomorrow. We have not met yet, and we will be meeting following this meeting. But I do want to note that there are 5 public hearings that have to do with new business licenses for 5 different restaurants in town. Item 6 is our regular license applications. Item 7 is accepting a grant from Hennepin County for local housing incentive programs. Item 8 is a referral to committee and setting a public hearing for the regulation of sampling. This is Councilmember Gordon's action. We're setting the public hearing for January 20th. And the last item is the East Downtown Commons development. So provided everything is approved in committee today, we will be forwarding 9 items tomorrow, or Friday.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we have Health, Environment, and Community Engagement. With that, Chair, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. The Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee will be bringing 4 items forward for approval. The first is authorizing issuance of an RFP for the One Minneapolis Fund. The second is approving the mayoral appointees to the Youth Violence Prevention Executive Committee. The third item is accepting revenue from UCare to address environmental factors affecting children with asthma. And the fourth is accepting $186,000 also from UCare for the 2015 operating expenses for the UCare Skyway Senior Center.
All right, thank you very much, Councilmember Gordon. Next, we have our Intergovernmental Relations report, and there is one item moving forward there, but it is significant. It is our policy positions list, and then something new that we are doing this year, which is moving forward a short list, which we are calling our legislative agenda. And these are items that our staff and the committee believe will probably take the majority of lobbying time at the legislature on more of a proactive level. So I just want to encourage you to take a look at that. For those who are not on the committee, this does not mean we don't have the ability to bring up additional issues or respond to additional issues, and that is the purpose of having the much longer document which lists our full lineup of policy proposals. So that is the item that will be coming forward. Next, we have Transportation and Public Works. With that committee's chair, Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The committee will be forwarding 8 items for full council consideration. Item 1 is the Penn East McKinley area's Girard Humboldt Avenue street resurfacing projects and a series of resolutions to move that forward. Similarly, the Minnehaha Avenue street reconstruction project will be forwarded to the full council. The following items will be referred to Ways and Means Committee: Sentence to Serve contract program, to not to exceed contract amount of $75,000 for over 3 years for those services. Item 4 is the Penn Avenue Street Reconstruction Project Contract Amendment. Safe Routes to School is item number 5, the infrastructure funds through the MnDOT program for that. Item 6 is the Southwest LRT Project Master Funding Agreement, and it's a series of actions to consummate our arrangement with Metropolitan Council for that project. And the RFP, item 7 is the RFP for the Public Works on the Nicollet Mall, and that's authorizing issuance of the request for proposals for artists to design new artwork to be integrated into that project. And then item 8 is a series of single low bids for activities of the department. And I'll stand for questions, Madam Vice President.
All right. Just double checking, but I do not see any. And so we'll move on to our next committee report, Ways and Means, with Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ways and Means will bring forward 9 items for consideration on Friday. The first item will be the executing a contract with the Convention Center and Comcast for cable television services. Also a bid for the Convention Center remodeling of the show offices. We're accepting the low bid for the Curry Maintenance Facility truck wash replacement project, as well as a low bid for building the Animal Care and Control dog run project. Entering into an agreement with MnDOT related to First Precinct parking issues for Minneapolis Police Department, and passing a resolution authorizing issuance of tax-exempt increment revenue refunding bonds for Village of St. Anthony Falls and Grant Park project tax increment refunding projects. We're submitting the 2014 pay equity report to the Minnesota Department of Management and Budget, and there are 2 tentative labor agreements with stationary engineers, water maintenance technician units, and the final item is the acceptance of a $200,000 grant from the Minneapolis Downtown Improvement District, and this is for continuing services with the Downtown 100 and the Focus 1824 initiatives. Those will be the 9 items we'll be talking about on Friday.
All right, thank you very much. And finally, we have zoning and planning. With that, Chair, Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We have 4 items on the Zoning and Planning Committee's agenda that we'll be forwarding. The first is to grant an appeal of a decision made by the ZBA regarding an FAR variance at 2000 Fremont Avenue South. The second is to deny an appeal for a McDonald's at 1100 and 1118 University Avenue Northeast related to some signs that they already installed. Item number 3 is approving our appointments to the Heritage Preservation Commission. There are 3 appointments, 2 of which are returning and 1 is a new appointment. And item number 4 is to approve our Arts Commission appointments for 2-year terms.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I believe we have concluded our business for today. It looks like if the clerk thinks we have one more item, please speak up. Is there one more item?
Madam Vice President, I apologize. I wanted to point out we have a closed session scheduled for Friday as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that additional piece of information, I believe we have concluded with our business for today, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much. So.